Hi, folks. Andrew here. Top fitness strategies. Yes, I am the face who runs the place. We got a great interview coming up for you again today. This is getting to be fun with these interviews. I love it. Absolutely love it. Hey, if you're here for the first time, thanks a lot. Top fitness strategies. We're all about the fitness over 50 crowd. Look better, feel better, gain some confidence. That's what we're all about. And if you're here for the first time, yes, we have sponsors with the show, with my podcast, with my live stream, wherever you're watching and or listening this on, whether it's recorded or I guess this isn't going to be live, it's going to be recorded. Okay, so we do have a sponsor, and it's usually sponsors of stuff that I've written, the books I've written. Today's sponsor is Health and Fitness 101, Simple Answers to Complex Questions. I write a weekly newspaper column, and I answer questions to my local folks here in my town. This is not online anywhere. So I've taken the best of, so to speak, and put it together in an ebook format for you. So check it out. Look at the show notes for all the good stuff. Okay, enough about me. What we got today, we're going to talk about mindset. And those who follow me know that this is a real passion of mine, the mindset stuff. So we're going to have a gentleman by the name of Sean Mitton on. Matter of fact, I'll bring him on right now. Hold on a second. Let me do this. How you doing, Sean? Welcome to Top Fitness Strategies.
Andrew, thanks for having me on today.
Okay, Sean has resided in North Carolina for over 20 years and is originally from Georgetown, Ontario. He is a passionate mind mapper who has created over 1,000 mind maps during his last 20 years for business and personal applications, beginning in his technology sales career. He could go, excuse me. Sean, this is typical for me to always screw up the bios of people I read. I'm more of an ad-lib type of guy. He would go on to author the hockey books, The Goal That United Canada, and more recently, When Canada Shut Down, 50th anniversary of the 72 Summit Series. Sean has been interviewed by several Canadian media outlets and has also interviewed notable athletes like Wayne Gretzky, the great one, as well as entertainers, business leaders, and government officials. He's currently doing talks regarding student of the game mindset that combines how we can improve with the process of question-based mapping. And now to add to all that, you can say you're a guest on Top Fitness Strategies. Welcome, Sean.
Great to be with you today, Andrew.
Okay, excuse me. Hope I didn't mess that up too much. So what we're doing today is a little bit different than the norm what I usually interview. I usually interview folks who are nutritionists, or some sort of muscle guys or stretching guys or guys and gals, I should say, and all that good stuff. This is one of the few times that we're talking about mindset. Now, whoever follows me, if you know anything about what I do and how I do it, I break everything down, and we'll get into this in a second, Sean. And I know this is about you today, but I have to do my stuff at the beginning. That's just how it works here in my show. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself before I go into a lot of other stuff here. I have all kinds of questions for you. So, who are you, Sean? Where'd you come from? What do you do? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, I grew up in Canada, so I was a big sports guy. I loved hockey and baseball growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was winter hockey, summer baseball, and it was all about training. So I played, up to junior ball in baseball. It was pretty competitive, and I was fortunate to have an opportunity in during the Y2K timeframe to come to the U.S. and I was recruited for technology sales.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things when you move to another country, you want to make new connections and networks. And so I formed an organization of Canadians in the Raleigh-Durham area, if people are familiar with North Carolina.
Okay.
And, one of the things that connects Canadians in general is hockey. And so, it's a great sport. And so, one thing led to another, and I end up bringing this gentleman down to speak, and his name's Paul Henderson. And for those who don't know the Paul Henderson story, back in 1972, he scored a famous goal in the 72 Summit Series.
Mm-hmm.
For those in the U.S., it was kind of similar to the 1980 Miracle on Ice when the U.S. beat the Soviet Union. It's a very famous goal, Mike Eruzione.
Yep.
Well, what happened in Canada was on the eighth and final game, the final game was being played in Moscow. So in Canadian time, it was the afternoon on a Thursday. Basically, the whole country stopped. And if you can imagine the man on the moon situation where classrooms rolled TVs into classrooms, that's what happened in Canada in 1972. And
Wow.
so from basically from Victoria, British Columbia, all the way to Newfoundland, the whole country stopped to watch this final game. And Canada was losing 5-3 in the third period. They came back to
Mhm.
tie it, and with 34 seconds left, Paul Henderson scored a magical goal. And if you can imagine, the whole country celebrated at the same time.
Wow.
And I've told this story so many times, and I still get chills because it's very rare in a country's history that they have a collective memory that's really positive, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I wrote the first book, really a collection about where people were and what it meant to them. And it was just great stories about everything from people being in cardiac wards where they had just had heart surgeries and the heart monitors went off when he
Mhm.
scored. People in coal mines on top of telephone
Wow.
poles. And the first story in the book is how his goal saved a marriage.
Wow, that is awesome. There's all kinds of similar stories on a smaller scale in the United States,
Yep.
with local sports teams and stuff like that, but not for a whole country. So that's awesome. And what's the book called again?
The first one's called the United Canada. So it's more about human interest stories than pure hockey stories,
Okay.
but really about nostalgia and about connecting people back to a time. And that was for the 40th anniversary and the
Okay.
50th anniversary, which happened in 2022.
Hmm.
I wrote a second book called When Canada Shut Down, and that was really from a Canadian and a Soviet perspective. And
Okay.
so I partnered with a hockey historian, but also a gentleman who spoke Russian and had ties to the Russian hockey network. And we got access to those people in fascinating interviews.
Oh, wow.
And Andrew, what I think you'll find fascinating is, if you think back to, and I'll admit I was only 3 years old in 1972, but when we did research, really at that point in time, if you were a professional athlete, what would happen is you'd play your sport, you'd get paid, and in the summertime, you'd have another job. It's
Right.
not like
Right.
today where people get paid millions of dollars. A lot
Hmm.
of these hockey players, worked in farms, they worked in car dealerships, they had insurance jobs, and so what would happen is they'd get out of shape in the off season, and they'd go to training camp, and they'd have to get in shape again. And that doesn't happen these days, right?
Right. Right.
It's 12 months a year now.
Oh, yeah.
And but what we learned in the process was back in the 70s, for the Soviets to get a competitive advantage, what they did was they trained all year long.
Okay.
And so they had a competitive advantage of being much better fit. And in fact, the first 2 or 3 games, they were skating circles around the Canadian team, which should have been perceived as much better. And
Okay.
the things that they were doing were incredible. For that time period, there was a goalie named Tretiak. For his hand-eye coordination, he would throw tennis balls against the wall and do squats. And back then, North Americans weren't used to all this off-ice training. It was
Okay.
what happened on ice.
Right. Right.
And so one of the beautiful things about this series is that we kind of learn from each other. They learn from us, we learn from them,
Hmm.
and it was really fascinating. And what's happened was, the whole sport improved because of this series, and Canadians had to look at themselves in the eye and say, "We've got to be better." There are other countries who may not have even caught up to us, but in some ways surpassed us, and that really permeated through the sport. So I'll pause for a sec. That's some of the fascinating things that I saw in the 72 stories that I did for the second book.
That is so cool, and I bet that, and I like the fact that it's all, and I think you said the term the human interest stories. I think you
Yes.
said that. Yes, I absolutely love that. I love that, and I'm sure we can talk about that all day long. But
Oh,
what I'm psyched about is this inner game stuff, all right, the
sure.
mindset stuff, I should say. You said that, and I'm labeling this interview, this talk, this however you want to phrase this, as this, and this is your phrase, not mine, but I'm labeling it this, is a student of the game mindset. Now, why I'm excited about this topic is I've written a couple of books for my site, ebooks, not on the scale of yours. This is all stuff that I've just got on a computer and wrote and things of that sort. And I've answered a lot of questions in the health and fitness world based on a lot of stuff based on the weekly column that I do in the newspaper. And of all these years I've been doing health and fitness, since high school, just like you're an athlete back in the day. I played baseball as well back in the day when I was younger and fitter and had hair. I see skinnier. Hey, we're both at the same hairstylist here. But what I found out is anything you talk about in health and fitness can fit into 4 categories. One being time, another one being nutrition, another one being body shaping, weightlifting, whatever. And the fourth one, and which I find is probably the most important, that gets very, very, very little attention compared to the other ones, is mindset, or the inner game, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
I call those the 4 pillars, and anything that I do, I base it on one of those. So like I said earlier, very rarely do I get somebody that comes on and talks about mindset or the inner game. A long time ago, and I can almost guarantee you've read this book or heard of it, The Inner Game of Tennis. Have you
Yes.
heard of that book? Yes.
Yes, I have.
I read that a long time ago. To this day, I couldn't tell you much about it, but I just found it fascinating as all get out, and that's what got me thinking about the whole mindset thing.
Yes.
So, in your bio, and I'm going a long way for this question, I know, you mentioned that you're a mind mapper. I'm going to assume that mind mapping has a lot to do with mindset, correct? Or am I totally off base there?
No, there's a component of, and what I'll do when I share the story, I'll relate it back to mind mapping for a second, about how we can all apply it in our lives.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll come together.
Okay. Yeah. You got a story you want to relate? Go for it.
So first of all, I want to relate back to, again, back in 1972, really back then, there wasn't this concept of self-improvement. That wasn't there back then. And what I learned was there was a fascinating player in the series who was actually also the goalie in the 1980 series against the US. And his name was Vladislav Tretiak. And nobody knew Tretiak before the 72 series. In fact, they thought he was a weak goalie. When Canada scouted him in Russia before the series, he let in 8 goals, and they came back and said, this guy's not much better than a junior B goalie. The funny story behind that is the next day he got married. And so, it's very likely that he was, having some type of, gentleman's party before his wedding.
Oh yeah, and his mind wasn't focused on the game; he was focused on his marriage. Yeah,
that's right. Well, this gentleman became a legend. He stole the series, if you will. He made the series ultra competitive, but at that time he was only 20 years old.
Okay,
and his backstory is really interesting because back then, again, back in the 70s in Soviet Union, his mother was a phys ed teacher. So he came from a foundation of physical education and knowledge. And so he not only did he get his undergraduate degree in physical education, he went on to get his master's. And when he did his master's thesis in my research, he did it on basically how to be the best goalie that you can be.
Okay.
So before I go forward on that, I want to stop for a sec to say,
sure.
How many people do a master thesis on their career? And the answer when I talk to people is nobody does.
No, I was gonna say I can't. No, it's very, very unlikely it's going to happen, right? Yeah,
but in some ways it's like, why don't we do that? And so when I dug into the way he attacked his thesis paper, and again, if you think about doing a thesis, you're probably talking about 40 to 50 pages. It could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months or more to write. It's a big investment of time. And how in his book, The Legend, he broke down the paper. He talked about a number of things. He talked about goals. He wanted to be a national team goalie. He talked about his motivation. He talked about being resourceful, thinking about his coach, his players. He talked about preparing on the ice with technical things that a goalie would typically do.
Okay.
He talked about modeling, finding people who are role models for him to study.
Makes sense.
He talked about the physical education and specifically back then, what types of things he would need to be the best goalie that he could be. And again, back then they didn't really have niche type of training for different positions.
Okay.
So he was ahead of his time. But he also talked about the emotional intelligence. He talked about, if you have adversity, if you let a goal in, how do you mentally react? How do you emotionally react? And so when you think about all these things, it was a very holistic process not just a linear thing where it's like, okay, what am I going to do when I get on the ice? He thought about everything that could happen. So he thought about his fitness, he thought about his health and his nutrition,
Hmm.
he thought about recovery. Again, he was way ahead of his time. And so, coming full circle, Andrew, one of the things that I've done in my past 20 years is I identified a tool and a process that's been really beneficial to me, and it's called mind mapping.
Okay.
And mind mapping is different than how we grew up in school. In school, we grew up with, a pen and paper, lines left to right. That's how we wrote our papers or our note taking. And mind mapping is very holistic in nature. It starts with a core idea, and then you have branches and sub branches.
Okay.
And so you can see in a hierarchical method how that information is organized. And the value or the priority is different than you would see in a linear format. And I bring up that topic is because, when I talk to people today, even my son for that matter, if you want to think about being the best that you can be, you don't have to write, a 30 to 50 page document like Tretiak did.
Okay.
What you can do is identify via mind map, all the different components of what it is to be the best athlete you want to be, the best fitness guy that you want to be. You can identify the exercises, the timelines, and with mind maps, you can also include attachments, links. So for example, if you were thinking about, different types of fitness activities, like whether it's yoga or strength training or cardio,
Hmm.
all those could be included in this mind map. And so what I do teach people is, depending on their level of sophistication, their age, the elite level they want to be at, how to break things down and to think effectively how they can be the best they want to be. And today there are so many resources at our disposal that you can go to any number of websites or people like yourself
Hmm.
and identify those areas that can help us be better. And of course, sports psychology is another component of that. And I do want to talk about, just briefly, mental health.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you know, People have so many challenges in mental health today, and unfortunately, it's reactivity. It's reactive. And what Tretiak was saying is, if I go in a slump or do these things, how do I get myself out of those things? And I think today, if I was doing, a mind map about my student of the game, if you will, mindset, I would absolutely include the mental health aspect. Because if you run into problems, if you're in a slump, if you have an injury, whatever it is, like how do you overcome those things? And there's a mental capacity to assist you in those areas, besides going down a deep hole and getting into addictive type of situations.
Right, right, right.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea of kind of the mindset and how this could really work out. You could put a mind map together in a short period of time that really digs down into what can make you a better athlete and more fit.
Okay, all right. 'Cause, man, I got so much going through my head because you mentioned slump, and anybody that knows professional athletes knows what the term slump buster means, but we're not
Oh,
going to
totally.
talk about that.
Yes.
We won't get into that. But
Yeah.
this mind mapping thing, and now it's turned on this little fascination inside of me, because I thought it was more of a like the inner game that I was telling you about, but it seems to be they are components of each other, if you will, if that makes any sense a little bit. So you say you can make a mind map out of just about anything. Is that how you just said a
Yeah,
second ago?
exactly. So
Okay, all right.
there's no software that, well, there's been software for quite a while.
Mhm.
The funny thing is, the company that I use, which is based in Europe, they're a software as a service. They have over 20 million subscribers. And
Okay.
mind mapping was really educated to the masses in Europe. And in North America, we really didn't, people, if I say mind map, they said, yeah, I've heard about it, but I don't really know what it's about, because they haven't been formally trained.
Okay.
And so that's really what I want to help people understand, is these tools are available, to think more strategically, to use both from a business or personal or team type aspects. I've
Okay.
helped people write outlines for books. I've helped people organize weddings on mind maps. And the nice thing is, it's all in one visual page, and you can have multiple branches to expand and have more things to break it down further.
Okay. Once again, you got me thinking of all kinds of different things. All right. So I'm going to put you to the test here. And
Sure.
and this is just going to be really basic. So if I came to you,
Yeah.
and let's keep it on a health and fitness level, okay,
Sure.
not a business, just a health and fitness level.
Yeah.
Even though I love to talk about business, but since this is a health and fitness channel, I got to talk about that. One of those kind of
Let's
things.
do it.
So I'm out of shape. I come to you and I say, Sean, all right, I want to get back in shape. I'm 50 plus years old. Let's just say 55.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do it. I was an athlete back in the day and I've been away from it for so long. All I know is I can go back to the gym and I want to bench press and do squats. Obviously, that's not the best method for me to get back in shape.
Right.
What would you do with me for the first, if I walked into your office and sat there and told you this?
Yeah.
Or I'm assuming there's a lot more to it. There's a probably questionnaire and everything else, but
Right.
you get what I'm talking about here. How would you start me off, or what would you do to help me understand this mind map thing?
Yeah. So in what we're doing really, Andrew, is we're creating a visual plan, right?
Okay.
And
All right.
so the first thing is we're going to talk about, what the goals are, and identify, what's important. And I think the second part is, so that would be a core branch is, what are the goals? And so
Mhm.
we might talk about a number of things, right? We might talk about strength. We might talk about flexibility. We might talk about cardio. If somebody's having problems sleeping, that could be, those could be some
Right.
things that are core
Right.
part of it. If there's a sport involved, meaning they want to do something in particular, like, a marathon or, some type of contest,
Mhm.
those would be identified. Then we might go into things such as motivation. I think motivation is an important part, because if you go into a plan and somebody's not committed, they don't have a reason, the why factor,
Mhm.
then it's easy for them to jump off, right? Kind of
Mhm.
like the New Year's resolutions type. So I
Right.
like to jump in motivation, and then I like to talk a little bit about what's the plan? Like what are we going to do to get there? And I think part of it is, if you're to say I want to make $1 million,
Mhm.
there's an investment and there's a sacrifice, meaning you're putting money away. Same thing with fitness. Like if you're going to be committed to it, like what's the sacrifice? And maybe sacrifice isn't the right word, but what's the commitment level? Like if we're going to do this, are we going to do this once a week? Are we going to do this once every 2 weeks? Or are we going to do it, 3 to 5 times a week?
Okay.
And I think that's part of, thinking about the goal, thinking about, the why, and then thinking about, how much is going to be invested in that. And then we can start talking, designing a plan to address the goals. And so, any of those branches could be any number of things that you as an advisor may work on them with. So
Mhm.
there could be a number of different activities. So that could be one component of it. Now, another component of it could be the nutrition, right?
Mhm.
So we'll dive into nutrition and talk about what's needed, especially in the 50 and over crowd, right? We got to watch what we eat. I
Of
can't eat as
course.
much pizza as much as I used to, which is a good thing. And I think the other thing too is, and then we'll also talk about the mental mindset too. Um,
Okay. All right.
there's two components of that I want to address and think about.
Sure. Sure.
One is, first of all, achievements. This is one thing that I think people don't do very well. If you go and do the work, you got to celebrate it, and there's got to be like mini celebrations along the way, because you want to get that feeling that of confidence. You want to get that feeling of joy. And I think sometimes when people, even when they achieve their goals, they don't always celebrate the way that they could. I think the other side of it is, if you have bumps in the road, meaning that you're going through the plan, you're not executing the way you want. There's got to be a little bit forgiveness at the time, but you've not got to find a way to reset. Right? You can't let it go. If you miss one or two, you've got to find a way to reset and get back on and clear the slate. Not have this feeling of guilt, but the mental side of, okay, let's go. Back to what is the goal, what is the motivation,
Mhm.
and then I think the other thing too is, I think it's helpful to what I call resources. There could be a coach, somebody to encourage you, somebody to do it with. So it could be a partner. And I think if you start mapping out all those different ideas, you'll find that you have more success, and you can see visually how this all comes together. And really, what you want it is to be sustainable, right? You want it to be not something you do just for 3 months.
Mhm.
but something that you can becomes a habit for the rest of your life. And for me, fitness has been such a part of my life that if I go without doing some type of exercise for 2 or 3 days,
Hmm.
like I feel I have a bad feeling, like I've got an itch or a craving to get back at something.
Okay. Very.
So those are some of the things that I would mind map. And of course, mind mapping is a software tool, so you can add a lot of color, you can add attachments, you can add links from websites, you can add YouTube videos, you can add pictures. So it's a very, very depth and rich medium that people can use to really feel confident about what they're trying to achieve.
See, as you're saying all this, I am just fascinated by everything you're saying. But at the same time, maybe at my age, which I'm just a couple of years older than you are,
Yeah,
not much. I was you were 3 years old when that then 72. I was 4 or 5, something like that,
yeah,
if my math is correct. So we're roughly about the same age.
right.
A lot of the folks that I don't want to say that I deal with or that I talk to are not that hip on technology. So, for instance, I even though I do have this internet stuff and websites and do like live streaming and stuff like that, I'm still old school when it
Yep.
comes to writing stuff down. Even though
Yes.
I can't read my own handwriting, so that's kind of pointless sometimes if I write something down. So and then, so you all of a sudden you mentioned technology with all these colors and pictures and blah blah blah. It
Yep.
kind of, I don't want to say it scares me, not the right word, but it kind
Yep.
of taking me back, saying, "Oh, wait a second, is this
Right.
something you want to get into?" Now, do you have people that you have are like that as well?
Well, first of all, the software is actually very intuitive. It's
Okay,
it's actually really easy to use, and I mentioned some of those other features, but you don't have to use any of those. If you just want to put your ideas down. The other thing that I want to add to that is one of the benefits about mind mapping is it's really easy to get started and it reduces procrastination because you get your ideas down really quickly and you can move the branches up and down and around. So let's just say that one of the reasons why we procrastinate in things is we don't know how to get started,
I agree.
right?
Yeah,
And so let's just
absolutely.
say somebody said, okay, I want to put some exercises down. I don't know exactly what this will look like. I want to get some flexibility. Let's start with yoga. Let's start with these things. And before you know it, you're building out something that takes form. In a linear fashion, it doesn't work that way because of the order and the structure that's presented to us. Um, and to go back to your question about technology and age,
Hmm.
another thing that I do with mind mapping is I help people tell their stories through their life journey. And I did a recent workshop with people who are 55 and over, and specifically, there was some retired teachers who were in their 80s,
Okay,
and they approached it with a little bit of hesitation.
okay,
And so I prompted them with some questions. For example, what were some of their favorite trips or restaurants and things of that nature. And Andrew, in 30 minutes, they had 50 memories.
okay.
And so what I'm trying to say is I think people are, especially older people, are becoming more comfortable. And I think what happened during COVID, especially with being away from kids and grandkids, that people were more open to trying things like Zoom. And
Right,
so I
right.
think I think they're open to trying things more. And I've done mind mapping with my mom who's 80, and we mind mapped what her transition was like into retirement.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different use cases, but to answer your question, it's not as hard as you might think it might be.
So one thing I'm thinking of here, and if I hope this question comes across like I'm thinking of it here. You say it's not linear; it's more of a round thing with little what I'm calling spokes. What I'm visioning spokes coming out of it,
Yeah.
of spokes.
Yes.
But then you say you talk to these older folks and you had them about jogging their memories
Right.
of something. Well, wouldn't that just be writing them down in linear form? And what's the difference between is there? I guess is there something psychological about being a wheel with a spoke versus just writing across in a line? Is
Yes, because
okay,
there's a relational and association. When you see different things, it triggers your mind in different ways.
okay,
Which is why your memory kind of expands because you're not looking at just at a linear fashion. And so there is kind of a little bit of a note taking or linear part, but you can move them around and have different you're looking at a whole holistic map versus just the linear side of things like you would, a notepad.
Okay.
So I do find that people have better recall. And by the way, Andrew, I would be happy to work with you one-on-one to give you an example, aside of our talk today here.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Because there's once again, there's so much here that, and I only asked for 30 minutes of your time, and we're about up. There's so much here, and this last 10 minutes especially, that holy moly, you open up, whoo, because what I thought it was, obviously from my talk here, and I knew nothing about it, was more of the inner game, the mindset. So mind mapping and mindset, I thought were basically one of the same, and obviously they are complete. I don't want to say completely different.
Yeah.
They are two sides of the same coin, or one side. What's that phrase? Something like that. So,
Yeah.
so I don't know what I'm saying here, but it's a lot different than I thought it was, which is just absolutely fascinating to me at this point.
Yeah.
So, oh my God.
I'll broach a different type of question, leading to what
Okay.
you're thinking. So, we talked about Tretiak and think about from an athletic standpoint, how you can be the best athlete that you can be.
Mm-hmm.
So if we switch it for a second, and, a lot of kids grow up in athletics.
Right.
We learn a lot about team building and all the good things that go along with sports. But what happens when you want to find a career, right? So that's the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so this same general process about what I call the student of the game mindset can be transferable to your career. So let's just say,
Okay.
you finish your sports,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, I want to be a fitness expert.
Okay.
And so then you can start building out, well, what would it be like to be a fitness expert? What are all the things that I need to do? And I break it down to what's called question-based mapping, where one is, we want to ask really good questions. Who would be an expert in the fitness field? Who could we talk to that we understood what it takes for them to get there? Not
Mm-hmm.
just from an academic standpoint, but an emotional standpoint. What a day in the life looks like. What resources would you have at your disposal? All those things. And I wish I would have approached my career from that perspective, because, I think a lot of people go through the path of, okay, let's just get a degree, and then we'll find out a job. And if we approach it, reverse engineered a little bit and say, I want to be a drone engineer. Well, what does that look like? How much do I get paid? What do I need to do? And so what I want people to understand is, these are transferable skills, both from a fitness and sports to whatever endeavor is relevant to you.
Wow, that's fantastic, man. And once again, we can talk all night long in here and all day long. And but like I said, I only asked for 30 minutes of your time, and I'm a little bit up right now. Again, I'm talking with Sean Mitton, and if you want to find him, it's at mindful-memories.com. And Sean, tell people how else they can find you, and what they can do at the website.
I love to connect and network with people on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. And, I'm also looking at partnerships and collaborations, because I think the mind mapping process can be applied to any number of things. We've talked a lot about fitness today,
Mm-hmm.
but, this morning I was working with somebody to help them on their consulting business, how to break things down a little bit from business development. So there's a lot of different use cases, but, ultimately I want to educate people. And I think this talk is a good example that when you see something in a different way, it
Mm-hmm.
stimulates your thinking, your mind, and creates new ideas. And I hope, Andrew, you and I get to work a little bit more and talk more, because, I think there could be some cool things that we do as well.
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. Again, Sean Mitton, and it's at mindful-memories.com. I'll also have everything linked in the show notes, so get over there. You can find him on LinkedIn. Are you on any other social media you want to promote, or is it?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the best one from a business perspective, and we'll leave it at that for today.
Okay, and is it Sean Mitton on LinkedIn?
Yeah, Mitton. Yeah.
Okay. Once again, I'll link it down there. So, thank you for being here, Sean. I do appreciate it. I would love to reserve the right to have you come back for another episode so we can get more involved with this in the future. So I hope that's as part of it. So,
Absolutely.
Hey, I forgot to do something. Gosh darn it. We talked about hockey earlier. I'm originally from Toronto, but I moved to Indiana when I was 4 years old, so I don't remember anything about it. And we had zero hockey where I grew up. But and I got to do this. Check this out, huh?
Oh my gosh.
And
Man,
for those on the podcast listening, I just unzipped my jacket and I have a Toronto Maple Leaf jersey on. So there you go.
Andrew, you were sandbagging me. You held out on me.
I completely forgot I had it on. I said, yeah, I'm going to surprise him. I'm going to have this zipped up and everything else. And we got so
You really must have got into talking.
I completely forgot. That's how my show goes. You know, one of the stuff I do here. So Sean, again, thank you for being here. And folks that are watching on the video, fantastic. You'll see what I just did on podcast. Hey, guess what? You have to go find a video. So there you go. Again, Sean Mitton, www.mindful-memories.com. I will link to it in the show notes. He's fantastic for what's it called, mind mapping. We talked about that. Go check it out. It's fascinating for not just health and fitness, but for business as well. So Sean, thanks for being here. Thanks for being my guest today.
Terrific, Andrew. Thanks for
having
me on today.
Fantastic. Until next time, folks, this is Andrew and Sean, Top Fitness Strategies. Until next time, ciao.